wise, we never really went over a postural control, postural stabilization workout with you guys. So that's what today's going to be all about, is focusing on different exercises that can counteract poor posture. We see it all the time, even when we all aren't working from home, but there's so many people that have desk jobs or sitting in a computer. We see it with teachers all the time, even if you're on the ground interacting with the kiddos, it lends itself to that sort of like forward head, rounded shoulder posture. So today is focusing a little bit more on the exercises, more for the upper kinetic chain and how we can balance that imbalance in the system, as well as a few of the things we can do to counter some of the discrepancies we see in the lower kinetic chain as well. However, those also can refer back to some of our exercises regarding core, hips, legs, that kind of stuff. So for today, we mainly just have a lot of TheraBands, resistance bands. We brought the foam rollers out again, as well as lacrosse balls to show you guys a few things for some stretches. And then we also just grabbed a couple of weights. Some of the exercises you can do absolutely without weights, and it's still pretty good workout on its own. Again, as far as the weights, really you don't need more than 3 pounds. And then for one of the exercises, you can do a modification with heavier weights. But again, we'll show you guys different things. So we'll go ahead and get started. We got a nice little just mobility warm up as usual. So we're gonna just start actually with kind of going over your pelvic neutral. So let me grab a chair real quick.
I'll do it standing.
So Marissa's going to show you standing. Go sideways here. But you want to be able to have a little bit of dissociation between your lumbar spine and your pelvis. So whenever we've talked about hip flexor stretch, we're always talking about moving the pelvis, tucking the pelvis. So basically you want to just make sure you can tilt your hips forward and then round them back. So it's almost like we're going into that, like, all right, let's stick our butt out, and then let's tuck our butt underneath us, almost as if you have a little tail tucking between your legs. So these are pelvic tilts. This is a great warm-up to do just to kind of focus on that lumbo-pelvic dissociation, creating motor control through the core, through some of the hip stabilizers. However, it's also a good way to determine where you're sitting and where your neutral pelvis is. So while Marissa can kind of keep showing you guys in standing those pelvic tilts, I'm going to take my hands, place them right on my sit bones, that bony part of your butt, and with my feet flat on the ground, I'm going to tilt my hips forward into that anterior pelvic tilt, and I feel the weight come off of my hands of those sit bones, and then if I roll all the way back, I feel them kind of stick in my hands, and then they roll off again. So as I'm rolling back and forth, I'm trying to find that point at which the ischial tuberosities, the bony parts of your butt, are the most prominent, the most like sticking into your hands. So for me, that's right about there. And that's my neutral pelvis. So when I'm seated, at a desk doing computer work, whatever, this is pretty much where I should be sitting. Again, if you're tilted too far forward, that's a lot of tightness through your hip flexors, or we all tend to adopt this posture, but then we're reaching forward, and that creates that whole forward shoulder, rounded shoulder, forward head posture. But if I find that nice neutral pelvis, I should be in a more neutral state. That reduces all that tension and stress to hip flexors, hips, back. So you can either use it as a warm-up, like we said, as far as lumbo-pelvic dissociation, getting some motor control and activation, or as just kind of a postural awareness exercise to determine where you should be seated. Okay, moving on. Let me get this out of the way. We'll do some circles of our head to get the cervical spine all warmed up, because again, we're focusing more on upper kinetic chain. We're just going to do the little half circles from side to side, so that way we're focusing a little bit more on the flexion with some rotation. Just feel a nice stretch. You can always kind of open your palms. Try to keep your shoulders a little bit more depressed down. That'll give you a bigger stretch. And at any point, if you feel like you want to hold it in a certain area because you feel a bigger stretch there, you always can do that. Add that little overpressure. But it is a nice dynamic mobility exercise. go into extension and half rotations. You hear a lot of crunching. So I know a lot of times you guys always bring up, things are popping, snapping, crunching. There's a lot of that can go on in the body, but generally if it's not hurting you, if it's not painful, don't worry too much about it. Okay, good. All right, on to the next one. We're going to do our shoulder rolls. So let's go ahead and just roll our shoulders backwards. Again, a lot of these mobility exercises, while these aren't necessarily stretches, if you're sitting at a desk, 8 hours, 9 hours a day, you just kind of want to get out of your static positioning. So even just doing some shoulder circles forwards and backwards, and break that sort of static posture. And switch to forwards. Gets those muscles activated. You're bringing good blood flow in. And again, it makes you a little bit more aware of what's actually restricted, what's actually tight, right? So, sometimes you don't really realize it until you start to move. Like today, I didn't realize my upper traps were actually pretty tight. So, something I should probably focus on later. And then we'll go to the chest hugs. So again, stuff we've done in the past for mobility exercises. You can do arms straight. You can feel this today in the back of my shoulder near my rotator cuff. Actually, don't know why. I don't know what I did.
Your neck's feeling tight today, so this is a good day to do that.
Yeah. And then you can do it with elbows bent, adding a little bit of thoracic extension, opening up the chest. Yeah, feels good. So again, these are things you can so easily do at your desk. While you're looking at your seated posture, go ahead and shake it out. It's not a heavy load. It's not like, oh, I just went out and squatted 400 pounds. That's a heavy load, but very minimal duration of time. Similarly, when you're seated at a desk for 8 hours, sure, the load is very, very small, but the duration of that load is much longer. So you still need to make sure that you're stretching and getting out of these postures, because both ends of that contribute, whether it's a heavy load, small load, looking at duration. Think about those different variables that might contribute to restrictions or inhibition in the system, and pay attention to that and make adjustments. But okay, so we are going to get into a little bit more of the exercises. So one of the big ones that we really like to do are chin tucks. So that literally is giving yourself a double chin. So do you want to do it standing, and I'll do it laying down? So I'll go this way to show you guys. So you don't, yeah, so with the chin tucks, like I said, it literally is giving yourself a double chin. As great as that is, everybody wants to do that. But the reason is that we're activating the deep neck flexors. We're not actually nodding forward, because those are our superficial neck flexors. Those are already, overactive, tight enough as it is. So we're trying to get the next layer down, the ones that actually kind of help support and stabilize, the 10-pound head on top of our body. So these guys, again, Marissa's going to show you in standing, equivalent to sitting, whatever. I'm going to do it on the ground, and all we're going to do is, it's nice to give yourself that little cue of 2 fingers on your chin, and just tucking in, giving myself a nice double chin there. And again, if you look at both of us, we're not nodding our head forward. I'm not coming up off the ground. I'm just tucking my chin right back into it. It's almost like a little bit of a retraction, and hold.
And if you're doing this in standing or sitting, a nice place to start is to think about fixing your alignment of your head. So if you feel like you're in this forward neck posture, first kind of correct that alignment, bring ears over your shoulders. And then, like Natalie said, you can use your fingers to just cue that gentle chin tuck. So you should feel it coming from these deep neck flexors in here.
If you at all kind of going off of that, feel it more down into the lower part of your neck, or even like the sides through here, you're probably doing too much of a nod. Because again, if I'm trying to lift my head off the ground, now all of a sudden you can even see it strain on the side of my neck. I feel it coming down towards my collarbone, but when I'm here and I just double chin, I feel it like actually where my double chin is.
The double chin muscles.
Okay, so those are a great one. Again, anytime you were getting neck pain, shoulder pain associated with sitting at your desk, I know for a while when I'm doing my paperwork and I spend too much time, every now and then I get like a little tingling in the upper part of my shoulder because I know I am adopting that posture. So if I just give myself a couple of chin tucks, it tends to go away. So pay attention to that one. Going off of that, a nice progression is adding either snow angels, or if you do them up against the wall, a wall angel. So I'm going to do these on the ground, and maybe you can just show against our nice little Function Smart banner. So these guys, again, are a nice one to have that little chin tuck with. So I'm going to do my chin tuck. I'm keeping my feet flat on the ground. I'm trying to keep my spine pressed against the ground. So if you're against the wall, try to make sure your spine has contact against the wall, that you aren't arching your low back too much, or even through the upper back. You want to try to maintain like nice flat positioning so your spine's neutral. In this position, again, chin tuck, arms out to the side. You can see my pecs are pretty tight today because I can't get my arms down, and that's okay. But we're just going to gently drop our elbows towards our side and then reach up overhead almost like we're making a snow angel. So as you go through this position, again, I'm trying to keep my back flat. I'm trying to keep my arms flat against the ground and moving through this position. But you might notice that certain parts of this range of motion are tighter than the others. And that's because the fibers of the pec fan out. You know, they're not all running in one direction. So again, if there's this particular spot that feels a little bit tighter, you can feel free to hold that as a stretch, or you can keep working through it in this sort of dynamic mobility. Again, try to maintain a nice neutral spine by keeping the back flat against the wall or the floor and your chin slightly tucked.
And that also goes back to how we talked about like stacking rib cage over pelvis. That's also a nice way to find your neutral spine in standing. So what Natalie was describing earlier about your sitting posture, you can be mindful of that as well if you work at a standing desk, not to be kind of like hanging on this position with an arched back. You could think about rib cage over pelvis, neutral spine. And same goes for if you're doing this exercise in standing.
Feel it into my pinkies.
You are.
Some neural
My left
tension,
side, I'm feeling that.
right? Okay, so again, nice mobility exercise, good posture awareness. Moving on to more of kind of a stabilization drill. This one's good to use your TheraBands with. So we're gonna bust out these guys. Again, you can do it seated, you can do it standing, you can do it lying on the ground, whatever you prefer. But this is basic shoulder blade, rotator cuff activation drill. Really great for posture because again, we tend to adopt this. So we're trying to get you guys back here. So it's a little bit of external rotation of the shoulder. So in order to do that, nice TheraBand here. You can do it without any resistance as well. But all we're gonna do is keep our elbows pinned down our sides. And then we're gonna pull away from each hand on the band, keeping our elbows pinned at our side, and then slow and controlled back in. So in this position, I like to have my palms up as opposed to down because it opens up the shoulder a little bit more. If you go palms down, we're actually putting the humerus into a little bit of internal rotation. It creates less space in the shoulder, so you might not notice as much range of motion. So again, these guys are great. You can easily do these at your desk, even if you aren't using a band. It's working on that just activation of controlling where the shoulder is sitting in space and activating our posterior muscles. So scap retractions, basically, a little bit of external rotation. And if you notice here, I'm trying not to overcompensate and arch my back. That tends to be something people do when they're working on rotator cuff drills. They might just start getting into this and like doing a little chest pop.
Or this.
Yeah, we see that a lot too. If you do these enough, like this is probably like 10. We're just not counting anymore, I guess, but I I really feel that starting to burn a little bit, like a good muscle burn back there here in my rotator cuff. So really important stabilization drill for posture. On to the next one. So posture really is, again, about strengthening everything back here and making sure this stays open. So when we're looking at these muscles back here, one of the most common ones we can do to sort of facilitate good posture are rows. So there's a couple ways that we can do this.
I'm going to hold it for you and then you can
Yeah. So you can obviously do it with our little resistance band. Marissa's going to act as my anchor. So I would either shut this in a door, wrap it around a table leg, I don't know, something to support. But with my arms here, I'm just going to pull straight back, squeezing my shoulder blades together. And what's great about rows is you can do this sort of wide grip row. And again, I'm focusing on squeezing my shoulder blades together. That's going to get more of your rhomboids involved. Or I can switch to more of a narrow grip row. And that's still going to activate those muscles, but we're also incorporating a few others along the kinetic chain. So you can absolutely do it this way. Standing is nice because, again, you can play with that posture, making sure you're not, anteriorly tilting that pelvis, watching those sort of compensations. We can also do it, maybe I'll have you step on that, so bent over row. You can do it that way where if you don't have anything to anchor it against, you can just step on the band yourself and absolutely do a row. Or, if you guys have been hanging with us through this whole quarantine, you can do bent over rows. We did this in our upper extremity day when we were working on strength, but again, whether it's rowing that way, which you can absolutely do with a band or weights, you can also do single arm if you're more concerned about your posture. Just make sure your knee and your foot line up. And again, let's see if you guys can see it this way. When I do this, I'm really watching my posture here. So I'm not hunched over, I'm not arching my back. I'm just trying to keep a nice neutral spine, head's looking down, and then I'm pulling right back towards me. So again, this way is great because you can focus on one arm at a time. Marissa's showing you the alternative with a band. And again, based on your level, you can obviously make this as challenging or as easy as you want it to be. If you really want it to just be like sort of a postural awareness drill, then keep your weights light. But if you're really looking to strengthen, grab some heavier weights. Again, you can absolutely do bent over row with free weights as well. Just make sure when you are doing bilateral bent over rows, again, you're watching your posture. See it all the time if people are doing this. They might be bending like this, and now the weights are way out here. That's a lot of stress to my low back. So you want to focus on that sort of like hip hinge, knees slightly bent, and my spine's neutral. And you want to get pretty low. Again, I'll see people standing way up here. If I'm pulling like this, all of a sudden that's getting way more into my upper trap, levator scapulas. So again, bend over, nice and low, hip hinge, pulling back towards you. You can do wide grip, or you can do narrow grip. I think at this point we've done like a million rows throughout all those variations. But again, rows are a classic way to work on your postural stabilization. If you think about sitting at a desk and you get tired, one of the natural things we all kind of do is either just like stretch like this, put our hands behind our back. It's that same sort of scapular retraction movement, that activation of those muscles, that's countering this. So super important one to work on strengthening. Okay, next one. We are going to bust out our... So these guys, again, kind of a functional training exercise for our rotator cuff. Whenever we are, using our upper extremity, we're reaching out in space, right? We talked about this, I forget when, but we talked about it at some point. All the days still blurring together. What's been happening so much today before we turned it on? Again, with this exercise, we're basically just moving straight into flexion, but if you put a resistance band around your wrist and push out, keeping your arms straight, that's gonna get a little bit of that external rotation involved to fire your rotator cuff. So in this position, my hands are pushing out against the band, and we're just gonna raise straight up and right back down. And as you raise up, again, try not to hike the shoulder. Don't let the upper trap take up the work. You want to keep your shoulders kind of externally rotated back in line with your ears and centered throughout the whole motion. So again, think of that shoulder being your axis of rotation. There's the little rod going through the middle of my shoulder, so I can't let it rotate forward or backwards or go up. It's just staying centered in that joint. And that's the role of the rotator cuff for you. It keeps it centered. Quite frankly, on this one, you don't need that big of a resistance band. I'm really struggling to even put tension on this one and get my arms up. So minimal resistance is absolutely fine.
So here you can continue to be mindful of that chin tuck, standing posture. You can kind of apply a chin tuck to any back exercise you're doing to make sure your neck is in proper alignment.
Like I said, this band's pretty thick, so I'm struggling to get this up.
I'm using really light resistance, and this is more than enough.
And I can feel myself wanting to do this to help. So same token, you can absolutely go against the wall and kind of monitor yourself to keep posture in line. That is a really good exercise. Ooh. Okay, so we are going to work on our lat pulls. So you're going to hear Wizard of Oz voice, I guess. So typically you would anchor this to, tie it in your door and then shut your door so it would be locked back here. Can you reach it?
Kind of.
Or I'll just dangle my hand. Get really creative today. But in this one, we are trying to activate, again, some of the lower posterior muscles. So we're working on lat pulls here. But when we work on our lat pulls, we're also getting kind of the mid trap and the lower trap involved. These guys are all very, very important in kind of maintaining a little bit more of a posterior tilt to your scapula. That's going to counteract that forward pull we often see from the chest muscles, the pecs being way, way too tight. They also contribute to important stabilization of the shoulder blade itself. So lat pulls are always a great one just to maintain good stabilization of that shoulder blade. And again, really activation along the muscles of the back of the shoulder blades is always going to be really important for countering that forward head, rounded shoulder posture we associate with work. So I can't really see what Marissa's doing, but you can do it with elbows bent, again, wide grip, or you can even do, again, narrow grip. That's going to target some muscles along kind of the side of the rib cage, which again play an important role in stabilizing the shoulder blade when we move. You can always do one arm at a time. You can do both arms at a time. But I think you guys get the idea from my nice Wizard of Oz voice.
That one's a little tough to find somewhere to anchor. We were talking about this earlier, how are we going to show this one? But if you can tie your TheraBand, put it up in the door, shut the door, usually make that work. Something like that. But soon gyms will probably be open, so you can also go to the gym and do it. At the lat pull down machine.
It's going to be a great day for a lot of people. Okay, so this next one, again, working on a little bit more of the lower muscles of the shoulder blades in the back, mid-trap, low trap, lats, that kind of control. Let's have you do it on the ball.
Okay.
We'll show you guys a couple of different things on this because there's a few ways we can modify it. You can do without weights. You can grab 3 weights. Again, you can do one arm at a time. These guys are called eyes, Y's, T's for a very obvious reason. You make an I, a Y, and a T with your hands. So in this position, Maurice is stabilizing herself over the ball. She's gonna raise her arm up. I think she just did the Y.
Yeah.
And so that's gonna target, again, these lower muscles in her shoulder blade back here to help stabilize. One of the big things we often see people do is start lifting too much with their upper trap and their deltoid. So when you're doing this exercise, make sure you're focused on this part of the shoulder kind of driving that movement. You want to feel that activation back here. And if you're feeling your shoulder fatigue out before this really does, then you're probably doing it wrong, because again, you're compensating with a little upper trap and posterior deltoid there. So while she continues to work on those, she can absolutely do one arm at a time, both arms, with weights, no weights. You can do it on a ball if you want to challenge your stability, or you can do it just lying on the ground. One of my favorite ways to modify this exercise is with a resistance band, because it's just, I feel like it's easier to crank it out than finding a location where you can like actually get your arm in position, or if you don't want to lay on the ground. But these guys, again, it's the same exact movements. I'm going to put tension on the band, arms are at shoulder height, and then squeezing my shoulder blades together, I pull out to the side, and then I go in opposite diagonal patterns. So again, I'm getting the T here, and then one hand's getting the Y while the other one's kind of dropping to the I position, and then switch. And if I go this way, again, in this position, always be mindful of your posture. You don't want to overextend the back. Trying to keep my chin tucked. And one important thing to note in this exercise is when we're going this way, I'm okay with palms down just for functionality of it. But when we raise up, the thumb should be pointed upwards. If I try to do this with my thumb pointed downwards, I don't get nearly as much range of motion. And again, it has to do with the position of the humerus and just how that joint articulates. So when you go up in your diagonal, rotate so your palm is almost facing the ceiling. The thumb's pointed up. And that's going to open up that shoulder for you more. And showing you from the back, again, I'm using my shoulders to drive the movement. Maurice is going to show you guys on the ground.
So you could do this like at the edge of your bed. So if this were the edge of my bed, I would be here, and then I would have a little bit more space for my arm. Thighs.
And again, ideally, kind of the periscapular region between my shoulder blades should fatigue out more quickly than like this part of my shoulder. I do feel it back in here, and that's because rotator cuff, again, is getting involved to help stabilize, keep that joint centered, but you don't want to fatigue out in this part of the shoulder or like up through here. It all very much is like back here and through here. Looks great.
Just laying on the floor.
Okay.
This would have been better to do on a table than the floor.
I know. So we have wall space and tables, but trying to get us in the like screenshot is always a challenge. Okay. So those, again, are kind of our basic go-to postural exercises. We wanted to keep them very short and direct so that they are something that when we all go back to work more regularly, they are things that you can easily perform either at your desk or say bring in a resistance band and take that like 2-minute stretch break to just hop up and work on some exercises just to counteract this posture, get some muscles activated and moving. And I even feel a little bit better already too, just like open.
And this next part will be even better.
Yeah, so we got, of course, cool down stretches, even though that necessarily wasn't like a full workout. Again, when you're doing these exercises like we talked about, we want you guys doing them more than just like, oh, you know, we just showed you 5. We're talking a lot as we go through this, but actually do a couple repetitions. Of course, if you are working on strength, it takes more than just like 5 repetitions a week to actually make a difference. So moving on to some of the stretches that are absolutely great to counteract this posture is hands behind your back, just like this, and then we're gonna open up the chest. So again, you can think of, if you watch our shoulders, we're rotating them backwards, retracting those shoulder blades. If you can't get your hands behind your back, if you have shoulder issues, then just stand with your palms out to the side, but also think of rolling them backwards, kind of keeping them depressed. And we're And even honestly, just doing this, again, I feel that tension, that stretch into my fingers. There's a lot of neural tension there. Do my chin tucks. It's also really hard not to arch my low back as I do that to compensate. That feels nice.
So just something that I just thought of, a really nice thing to do when you're sitting at a desk for a long time is cat-cows in your chair. So, and that's something you can do like all throughout the day. You don't need to do like 10 in a row. But you can just kind of round your spine, open up, and you're getting that chest opener, retracting the shoulder blades. So if I were doing it sitting in my chair, it would just be like rounding the spine where we kind of are in this position a lot throughout the day, but then opening it up. So just kind of getting some mobility and changing the position of your spine throughout the day. That's nice to do to stay moving a little bit even if you're sitting.
Yeah, we talk a lot about neutral posture, right? Kind of keeping our spine in one position. We're either always saying, oh, we're too arched forward, you know, in like a seated position or even running, walking. Or we say, oh, well, we have terrible posture and we're all slumped. You know, it's not that you don't want to be in these positions. The spine is meant to move, you know, it's made of different segments. So exactly as Marisa was saying, it's great to promote mobility, kind of that segmental motion throughout the entire spine because we want to preserve that range of motion.
So we want to be at the computer in a nice posture, but you can stay moving throughout the day, especially into extension.
She feels good standing. Just do this the rest of the time. All right, so two of our most favorite muscles to always talk about, upper trap, levator scapula. They cause that classic hiking of the shoulder. Super important ones to make sure that we stretch and don't overutilize. So classic exercises, stretches for these guys. Again, tilt your head to the side. I'm going to gently add overpressure. This will get my upper trap. If I'm standing, I can put my hand behind my back to keep that shoulder depressed a little bit. If that's too much, I can always leave my hand at my side. Or if I'm seated, I can grab the edge of a chair. You want to keep this nice and gentle. This is a muscle that often gets really, really tight. You can tell if you go to side bend your head and you realize, oh, I can't really get that far. Or if you notice this whole shoulder coming up, those are all indications that muscle might be a little too tight on you. Feels good. Switch. Same thing in this one. Try to keep your shoulder rolled back a little bit. And everything's trying to fight this posture, right? Basically, we see this whole thing shorten and we get stuck here. So it just looks sad.
So sad.
So we want to fight this really sad posture by keeping yourself open. I just feel sad doing that. With the levator scapula stretch, the slight difference in this one, instead of tilting to this side, now I'm just going to look down towards my pocket, towards my armpit. Again, you can do hand behind the back if you want to, grab the edge of a chair. But now I'm grabbing kind of up at the back corner of my head and pulling down. That should target this. Kind of where my ponytail is lying. I'll put it right there.
That's your levator scap.
My ponytail. That's probably one I hear all the time from people who work at a desk and switch. They're feeling a lot of tension in that muscle. I can really, really feel it on my right side. Again, that's the side I was telling you guys, I get a little bit of numbness, tingling if I sit too long at my desk. Because as much as I talk about posture, I'm not always the best at it.
Practice it very well. Especially if you aren't resting your arms on an armrest of your chair, then that's when levator scap and upper traps are really overworking because they're holding everything up for you to tighten. So I would say most people aren't resting their arms on an armrest when they're working.
It just feels so good. So good. Pay attention to just little movements because I've noticed You know, I'm extremely right hand dominant. I can't do anything with my left hand. So whenever I'm brushing my teeth, putting mascara on, whatever it is, I mean, that shoulder on my right side immediately hikes up, and I sit there and I'm doing this. Next thing I know, I'm like this. When I'm done brushing my teeth, they're putting my mascara on. That's not good. So pay attention and make those cognizant efforts to keep that shoulder down. I'll again, be brushing my teeth and start noticing it drifting up, and I have to remind myself, you know, put that shoulder back down because we want to reinforce good movement patterns. Don't just wait until, oh, whatever, it's easier if I have my shoulder way up here, let me just stretch it when we're done. No, you're reinforcing bad habits even if you are stretching it afterwards. So, yeah, practice what we preach. Okay, so next one. These are all some of my favorite stretches. So in this one, again, you can have a little hand towel. We just folded it into quarters. You can grab a towel, you can grab yoga strap, dog leash, belt, really whatever you want. But what I like about having a towel, maybe something a little bit longer than a washcloth, is it creates a bit more of a fulcrum, something to leverage your neck over. But all we're doing is placing this at the base of my neck. Yeah. So placed at the base of her neck, she's holding with her hands, anchoring forward, and then all she's going to do is lean her head back over it. So not only does this give her neck a little bit of support into that extension, but again, we're looking at that segmental motion. The spine is meant to actually move in separate segments. So we're giving that little leverage, that fulcrum, to stack over. A lot of times when people move into extension, I'll show you from here, we just sort of hinge, right? Like we think we're stretching, but no, I'm really just have one or two segments that are just doing all of the mobility for me. We want to see mobility throughout all 7 of those cervical vertebrae and extend over. Again, in this position, you can kind of see she's creating that leverage from the back. She's getting a nice extension there. From this position, I'm not letting my shoulders round too far forward. I'm just anchoring straight down, which is why it's nice to have something longer than just a little washcloth. And I'm extending back. And this, again, is more of like a dynamic one. I wouldn't want you guys necessarily holding here for too long because, again, that's kind of like putting your head upside down, right? It can cause decrease in blood flow, blah, blah, blah. Just don't do it too long, okay? Moral of that story. We are on to, okay. So, a couple different ways we can do this. I'm going to give Marisa the 1 ball way. If I had a sock, pillowcase, something, I could put 2 lacrosse balls in it or even just tape them up. But what we want to do is, my ponytail's in the way, both of us, you want to put these at the base of your skull. So if you notice, particularly if you have one side that's tighter than the other, you can focus that ball on one side, kind of work more localized, more specific segments, right? So a lot of times, we've all experienced it. At one point in our lives, you wake up and you're like, man, what the heck did I do to my neck? I can't barely turn. So that's a really good way to emphasize that sort of unilateral mobility. Again, if you're one of those people, you woke up and now all of a sudden you can turn your head to the right, but turning to the left, like you're stuck here, you can't bend. You want to put that ball on the left side because you're having restrictions in closing patterns. Well, there's the whole issue, science behind it, but just put it on the side you feel stuck on. So again, ball, you can lean against the wall. We're going to show you how you can do it, again, laying on the ground. It might be a little challenging. It kills me every time. All of a sudden I get really loud. It might be a little bit more challenging with a single ball on the ground. You're just going to have to support with your hands. Or you can alternatively roll up another towel, place it on the other side. It's not going to give you that same leverage, but it'll at least support the other side. Or you can take the 2 balls and again, put them at the base of our skull. These ideally would be in a sock or taped together. And then I place them there, and again, I can do that little bit of a chin tuck. So these are gonna roll because they aren't taped together, so I'm just gonna put my fingers there to hold it. But chin tuck, you can feel that nice little pressure into our suboccipitals. It's a nice little stretch for those muscles and a nice little mobilization for our higher cervical vertebrae.
And with that small chin tuck, you'll feel like a release of the muscle. So you don't need much movement. Just kind of basic, get it in there where you're feeling some tightness or tenderness, and then small little chin tuck.
And you will definitely feel if you're on, a bone versus more of a muscly area. This is going to benefit you a little bit more when you're on the muscle, but again, depending on your purpose, what you're targeting. I will say too that in that position, again, we're really focusing on suboccipitals. So people that experience kind of chronic headaches, that sort of like ram horn headache, this is a great one to help relieve that. Sometimes, you experience that even if it's not a chronic thing at the end of a long day because of that posture. And in this position, you can see how the back of my neck, this lower or upper part, is shortened. I'm putting a lot of stress and a lot of tension there. So you can irritate some of the nerves back there, and then you come out of that position at the end of the day, it's like, again, what the heck happened? So this is a really great way to end your day with, to help stretch those muscles out, or lunch break, or
Already helped me.
a Saturday. I don't know. A rainy day. Cool. So, foam roller. So another one that we've gone over a couple of times now, like we say, you'll see a lot of repetition in the ones that are our favorites, our go-to. So thoracic foam roller. You want to put it, you'll probably get a better angle from Marissa's view, the side view, but we want it perpendicular to our spine. Hands behind your head. Squeeze your elbows together. That's going to draw those shoulder blades out of the way and give you more access to your spine. In this position, you can just kind of gently walk your feet down so you're rolling up and down your spine. If you find a particularly tight spot, which is typically like bra line, that's where you want to kind of hinge and fulcrum at, right? So focus on this being your fulcrum, right? Arching over that. If you really want a big stretch, this kind of takes your breath away a little bit if you were pretty tight. Try to focus on that same pelvic tilt, because if we're arching our low back, we're creating extension through the whole spine, and yeah, there's one specific point we're extending over, but if we keep this a little bit more like flat or curved instead of extended, and then we fulcrum over it, it's just going to be a lot more localized to that segment. And it's a lot more uncomfortable. Where you can just, again, kind of gently roll. Again, try to keep the elbows squeezed together to give yourself access to your spine. Don't roll quickly up and down. It should be just kind of nice, slow, and controlled as always. And then you don't need to keep your butt off the ground. In fact, it's probably a little bit bigger of a stretch if you let your butt kind of drop to the ground, and then if you need to roll, yeah, just keep it barely off the ground, but gently walking up and down that spine. Just trying to give a nice cavitation there. So you might notice your back may pop or crack. It's one day when you do that, and that's totally okay. Just be careful, right? If you know you have a weak back, maybe don't do this one. But again, these things are pretty user-friendly, so don't worry too much about it. Moving on to the pec stretch, another one of our favorites. So this is mimicking what we kind of reviewed earlier on, those wall angels, but more of a static stretch. So this time we're going to go parallel to our spine. I'm going to put my butt on one end, my head supported on the other, and you can see that with Marissa a little bit better. But you want your spine to have complete contact against it. Do that little chin tuck. If you are a female and have a ponytail on, pull it to the side, or just do a really high pony, because that can mess with your posture on this. But then in this position, I'm just going to let my arms with elbows bent drop out to the side and just relax in this position. Again, you can make it more dynamic by doing those little snow angels. Here, if you notice, maybe way down at the bottom is tighter, hang out there. At the top, hang out there. Or if you're someone that is experiencing shoulder pain, shoulder issues, or you're getting numbness, tingling in this position, go ahead and just straighten your arms out so your hands are supported. You're still opening up the chest and getting that nice stretch without as much, leverage on the shoulder, because we're not forcing it into external rotation, or gravity's not forcing it into external rotation. We're just kind of easily, gently relaxing here. Again, you can move your arms down, start walking them up overhead. If you are doing arms straight, or even arms bent for that matter, when you come up overhead in this position, it's going to be really easy once you get past 90 degrees to want that shoulder to hike up or let it start shifting forward. Try to keep those shoulders back and down. But honestly, one of my favorite things to do on my lunch break is just hang out here and let my pecs stretch out. You might start to get a little numbness, tingling in the fingers after a while. Just stop at that point. You've done enough stretching. You're not harming anything, but it's just the tight muscle compressing on the nerves. So that's a good indication to go ahead and get out of that position. It's like when your arm goes to sleep, if you're sleeping on your arm funny. Jump out of that position, it goes away in a couple seconds. Okay, couple more for you guys. Again, some of our favorites, prone press up. This is getting more into some of the lower back stuff. So counteracting that really poor slump posture, which is probably more typical of students than people working at a desk, I would say. Lazy kids, including me. So hands under your shoulders, just like Maurice is doing. You're pressing up into a little cobra pose. We're working on that extension through our low back. In this position, I'm trying to keep my elbows at my sides, still emphasizing my shoulders down, rolled back slightly. But again, the emphasis of this one really is more on the lumbar spine, that segmental motion, as opposed to up here. So while we do want to reinforce good habits, if you're not keeping these guys back, it's not the end of the world. I get it. Alternatively, you can go onto your forearms, but you do want to focus on that segmental motion. So as I'm rolling up, think about one segment at a time rolling, because a lot of times we see issues with kind of like 3 or 4 segments all moving as one. Again, this is mobility, so don't think of it as a low back strength exercise. If you feel like this is more of a workout for your arms than anything, then come down to your forearms. Okay, so I'm going to press back up to hands and knees. Let's go ahead and go onto our sides. So this one really, again, we're looking at lumbopelvic dissociation. It's a nice hip opener. It stretches the obliques. It creates nice segmental motion in the lumbar spine. So Marissa's way ahead of me, and she's already showing you guys what we're doing. So open books. These guys, again, our legs are stacked. I'm not sure how to figure out which way I want to lay here. This thing's going to turn off. You know what? I'm just going to watch Marissa do it and talk.
So ideally a pillow, so your head's not like mine.
You have something to support your head, right? Because again, neutral spine. So her hands are stacked, her knees are stacked, feet are stacked, and then she's taking her top arm, rotating open, and following with her head, so that we're creating this sort of nice, like, unwinding, twisting motion throughout the entire spine. So you want to make sure the head follows. If she were to open her arm without turning the head, now we're creating this weird, like, rotation in the thoracic spine, but then the cervical spine's tweaked the other way, so just follow with your head as well. Again, you'll feel this kind of in the hips. You can see as she opens up, there's a nice twisting through the obliques. If you feel like you can't get that far, a really great trick is to go into a door frame. So if this acts as the door frame here, she has this now to support, stabilize herself, stabilize her hips, and then she'd be opening up into a hallway so she can get a little bit more of a stretch, more rotation. Alternatively, if you are noticing this is more difficult on your shoulder than anything else, just stack a couple pillows to help support that shoulder when you go to rotate and open, or you can do hand behind the head. So you're still getting your rotation, you're getting opening of the chest, it's just less of kind of a rotational torque.
On the shoulder.
Yeah. I always have to focus on like T-O-R, that torque versus torque. There's less torque. That's more the hips. Yeah, I know, we're all about the humor today, apparently. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. But our last one is that sort of modified thread the needle, modified child's pose position. I'm going to grab a foam roller just because it's here for ease sake. So again, this is to get more of the lats involved as well as that rotational extension stretch. So being up on the chair is a nice way to do it because Marisa can drop her thoracic spine into extension a little bit more. And then it's also less flexion, less load on the knees as well. So if you're someone that has knee issues and you can't do a typical child's pose stretch, then that's a really great alternative. But again, you're getting more mobility through the thoracic spine when you do this. I'm going to do it on the foam roller, but the idea being, again, I'm propped up a little bit so I can get that thoracic extension and just hang out here in child's pose. Again, I can walk my arm underneath me for that thread the needle kind of position. That's going to help stretch out posterior cuff, lats. I'm getting a little bit of rotation in my spine involved. And then whenever you come out of it, just make sure you reset because you might lose that little bit of thoracic extension if you were to just go from one side to the other. Again, we're trying to promote multiple areas of mobility here. I really don't know what I did, but my rotator cuff and my upper traps, it's all super tight.
So this was good for you.
I'm just gonna hang out here. That feels so good. So good. Cool. So again, those are some of our favorite postural exercises as far as stability, mobility. You want to do both. Again, when we're looking at posture, there usually is a pretty normalized imbalance we see, both that mirrors in the upper and lower extremity. And if you look at yourself from the side, like if you make a giant X like this, these guys and these guys tend to be the ones that are too tight and too shortened over years, while these guys, so the muscles in the back, those deep neck flexors, are the ones that tend to be lengthened and too weak. So we want to make sure we counter that by creating strength back here, strength in the deep neck flexors, and then opening the chest, opening the cervical spine, suboccipitals. You can do the same thing for the lower extremity too. Too tight, overactive, too lengthened, and too weak. So just think about that X pattern. I don't know why I have to turn around. I'm just all over the place today. Typically, one diagonal, too weak, too lengthened, the other too tight and overactive. So you just got to pay attention to those and work on countering with the opposite of active.